I was 7 years old when I learned that some things in these mountains don't want to be found. But once you see them, they never let you go. What you're about to hear isn't folklore. These are real encounters from people who walked into the Appalachian wilderness and came back different. You're listening to Silent Scream Chronicles. Subscribe, share, and hit that like button if you want more stories like these. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, because some of you might be closer to these places than you think. In the quiet of the mountains, the dark still talks. Some say it's just the wind. Others know better. I never believed in ghost stories. Not the kind my grandmother used to whisper when the wind crawled down from the Blue Ridge, nor the ones traded around campfires by hunters who'd been out too long. To me, they were just folklore, echoes of old fears clinging to these mountains like morning mist. But belief doesn't stop something from being real. I first saw the lights in the fall of 1998. I'd driven up to the overlook off Highway 181. You know, the one where the land drops away in layers of blue shadow, the ridge folding into itself like a sleeping beast. I was a photographer back then, newly married, still thinking I could capture beauty and sell it. The night air was cold enough to sting my teeth when I breathed. I had the tripod set up, the shutter open, waiting for the long exposure to drink in the stars. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind where even the insects seemed to have given up. And then it happened. At first I thought it was a car, a headlight flashing through the trees. But the light rose higher, far above where any road could go. It was a faint yellow at first, then white, drifting slowly along the ridgeline. Then another appeared, and another, until there were 3 of them, hovering, pulsing softly as if breathing. I blinked, adjusted the lens, and they were still there. Perfectly round, silent, deliberate. I don't know how long I watched, a minute, maybe 2, before all 3 lights faded one by one until the ridge was dark again. I packed up fast that night, my hands shaking against the metal of the tripod. By the time I reached the base of the mountain, I had convinced myself it was nothing. A trick of distance, reflected headlights, maybe ball lightning. The mind loves explanations when it's afraid. But the next morning when I developed the film, there they were. 3 perfect spheres of light hovering in the air. Not blurred, not distorted. They looked close. Too close. I showed the photo to my wife, and she laughed. But I couldn't stop looking at that picture. The lights had shape, intention. And behind them, just barely visible in the darkness, a line of trees illuminated from above, as if something bright had passed over them. That night I went back. The road to the overlook cuts through dense pine and laurel thickets. The trees crowd in close, their branches arching overhead like the ribs of some great animal. By the time I reached the top, the moon was high and thin, the color of old bone. I parked, killed the engine, and sat in the stillness. No sound, no wind. Only the faint ticking of the cooling engine and my own heartbeat. Waited. 10 minutes. 20. Nothing. And movement. A flicker on the horizon. I raised the camera, breath held, and there they were again. 5 this time. They rose in a slow arc, drifting apart and then together again like dancers in some wordless rhythm. My hands were trembling as I pressed the shutter. Then one of the lights broke formation. It sank lower, dipping into the valley, and for a moment it seemed to glide along the treetops. I followed it through the lens, zooming in, and that's when I saw it. There was something beneath the light. Faint silhouette. Human shape, maybe. Or maybe my mind needed it to be. It hovered there, motionless, the light burning above it like a crown. Then, without warning, the light shot upward and vanished. The others followed. Whoosh, gone, leaving me standing in darkness that suddenly felt too thick, too alive. That's when I heard it. Low hum. Not mechanical, not natural. Like the air itself was vibrating through my bones. The tripod trembled beneath my hands. My teeth ate. Then the sound stopped. And from somewhere deep in the trees below, a voice called my name. Froze. At first I thought it was an echo, the way sound bounces strangely off the ridges. But it came again, clearer this time. David. It wasn't my wife's voice. It wasn't anyone I knew. The sound came from the darkness below the overlook, where the slope dropped steeply into thick forest. I pointed my flashlight down, but the beam barely reached 20 feet before it was swallowed by the trees. "Hello," called. My voice cracked. "Who's there?" No answer. I should have left. I wanted to leave. But curiosity, or something heavier, kept me rooted. Then, as I stood there straining to listen, I saw it. A single white light moving slowly through the trees below me, weaving between the trunks. Not like a flashlight, it didn't cast a beam. Floated. It moved until it reached the base of the slope and stopped, directly below where I stood. The humming returned, louder this time. My chest vibrated with it. I took a step back, clutching the camera like a weapon. The light began to rise, threading upward through the branches. Leaves glowed silver as it passed. Higher and higher until it reached the edge of the overlook. Until it was right there, hanging 10 feet away from me. I swear to you I could feel heat on my face. And within the light, a shape. Vague, shifting, but human enough to make my blood run cold. Then the hum spiked. The camera in my hands went dead. The flashlight flickered and died too. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but that light and me. And in that brightness I felt something look back. Then it was gone. No fade out, no drift. One instant it was there. The next the night had swallowed it whole. I stumbled back to the car, shaking, my throat dry. When the headlights came on, I almost screamed at my own reflection in the glass. I didn't sleep that night. I tried not to return. I threw the film away, deleted the digital shots. But the image of that hovering shape burned behind my eyes. At work, at home, in the shower, I saw it. The way it pulsed, the way it felt. Aware. A month later, my wife found me standing at the window at 3 in the morning, staring toward the mountains. "You're scaring me," she said quietly. I didn't have the heart to tell her I'd seen a light out there again. Just one this time. Faint, hovering far off the ridge. After that, things started to happen around the house. Lights flickering. Electronics shorting out. A smell like ozone before a thunderstorm. Then came the humming. Faint at first, like a memory, but soon it was constant, vibrating through the walls at night. And sometimes just before it stopped, I swore I heard my name in it. The humming became my constant companion. It lived in the corners of my home, in the wires, in the walls. I'd sit at the kitchen table, listening to it tremble faintly under the hum of the refrigerator, and I'd realize it matched the pitch I'd heard that night on the mountain. At first, I told myself it was tinnitus. A leftover echo from the fear. But there's a difference between something inside your ears and something vibrating through your bones. This was the latter. And then one night my wife heard it too. She woke me around 2 a.m. whispering, "David, do you hear that?" I listened. The house was still. Then, faintly, like a pulse under the floorboards, the hum. Her eyes met mine in the dark. "It's coming from outside," she said. We went to the window. Far off toward the ridge, a soft white glow hovered above the tree line. Too far to be headlights. Too high for anything human. Pulsed once, twice. And then dimmed to nothing. My wife exhaled sharply. "It's back." I couldn't speak. My throat had gone dry again, just like that night on the overlook. She turned to me, eyes wide. "Promise me you won't go back there." Promise. I meant it at the time. But obsession doesn't care about promises. The next week I stopped eating right. I stopped answering calls. My camera sat on the table, lenses cleaned, batteries charged. I told myself I was done, that I wasn't going to chase it again. But every night the hum grew louder. Sometimes it came from the walls, sometimes from the ground beneath my feet. It had rhythm, slow, steady, like a heartbeat trying to sync with mine. Then one evening while I was in the shower, the lights went out. Not just flickered, snapped off. The hum surged so loud I felt it behind my eyes. And over the roar of the water, I heard it again. "Name. David." This time it was close, impossibly close. I tore the shower curtain aside and froze. Through the fogged glass of the bathroom window, something was glowing outside. Not bright, not blinding, just a soft, pulsing light. Hovered there maybe 10 feet from the window. For one paralyzing second, I saw movement inside it. Silhouette. A hand pressing against the light's surface. Fingers stretching, warping. Then it faded away. When the power came back, every clock in the house was blinking 12 o'clock. My wife left 2 days later. She said she needed space. Said I was scaring her, that I talked in my sleep, muttering to someone who wasn't there. The morning she left, she kissed my forehead and said, "You're still looking for it, even when you're not." After that, the house felt empty in a way I can't describe. The air itself seemed heavier, as though the hum had claimed all the silence she'd left behind. That night I gave in. I packed the camera, a flashlight, and a recorder and drove back to Brown Mountain. The overlook was deserted. No wind, no crickets. Just the familiar weight of the woods pressing close. I set the camera up, pressed record, and spoke aloud. "My name is David Holloway," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm here to document whatever's happening over Brown Mountain. I mean no harm. I just want to understand." The recorder crackled softly, catching every rustle, every exhale. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then faintly the hum began. I turned, scanning the tree line. It seemed to come from all directions at once, swelling and shrinking like breathing. And then the lights appeared. 3 this time, then 5, then 8. They hovered in formation, swaying slowly, impossibly synchronized. The hum deepened. I raised the camera, heart pounding. "What are you?" I whispered. The lights shifted, and for the first time I felt a response. Not a sound, but a feeling. A tug low in my chest, pulling me forward. I stepped closer to the edge of the overlook. The lights moved with me, dipping lower, swirling into a slow spiral. I followed without thinking, the world narrowing to that glowing dance. The ground sloped sharply downward, loose stones shifting underfoot. I stumbled, caught myself on a root, kept moving. Down below, between the trees, the lights drifted into a clearing I'd never noticed before. I don't remember deciding to leave the path. I just remember the hum growing stronger, until my ribs ached with it. The lights floated above the clearing, circling something on the ground. I stopped at the edge and raised the camera, and the breath froze in my chest. Lying there, half buried in leaves, was a shape. Skeleton. Human. The skull was turned upward, the empty sockets fixed toward the ridge. The lights pulsed faster. And then, one by one, they began to sink, melting into the ground around the bones until only one remained, hovering directly above the skull. The hum turned shrill, metallic. My ears rang, my vision blurred. And then the light dropped. I don't remember falling. I just remember the impact. Cold, damp soil against my palms, and a burning white glow flooding everything. Then darkness. I woke up at dawn. The hum was gone. The lights were gone. The clearing was empty. No bones, no trace of anything. My camera lay shattered a few feet away. The lens cracked clean through. I stumbled back to the car, my clothes damp and reeking of ozone. My watch said 6:47 a.m., but when I turned the ignition, the dashboard clock read 2:19 a.m. 4 hours. When I developed the memory card, most of the footage was static. But one frame remained clear. It showed the clearing, faintly lit by my flashlight. In the center, a tall, thin figure standing where the bones had been. His face was wrong. Too smooth. Featureless, except for 2 faint hollows where eyes might have been. Behind it, the forest glowed faintly, as if the light itself was seeping through the trees. I deleted the footage that same night. But even now, when I close my eyes, I see that shape standing in the dark. After that night, I stopped going outside after sunset. I kept the blinds drawn, slept with the lights on. But the hum found me again. It crept back, faint at first, then stronger, until every wall seemed to vibrate with it. Sometimes I'd wake in the small hours, paralyzed, and see a faint glow leaking in through the cracks of the window. And I'd hear that voice again. Closer. Always closer. I lasted 2 weeks. 2 weeks of pretending I could ignore it, The hum, the whispers, the faint shimmer at the edge of the trees each night. But Brown Mountain doesn't let you walk away. It's not that kind of place. Every man who's seen the lights, they say, either goes mad or goes missing. I used to think that was superstition. Now I think it's the only truth we have left. On the 15th night, the lights came back. Not distant anymore, but hovering just beyond the tree line behind my house. I stood at the window in my bathrobe, staring out at them. They flickered faintly, like lanterns swaying in the dark. I should have been afraid. Instead I felt calm, like I'd been waiting. I stepped outside barefoot. The air was cold and sharp with pine. The hum wrapped around me, low and steady, filling my chest like a heartbeat that wasn't my own. The lights shifted when I moved. Almost playful. They drifted deeper into the trees, pausing as if to see if I'd follow. And I did. The woods swallowed me whole. Branches scraped my skin. The earth was soft, wet, whispering with leaves. I walked for what felt like hours, guided only by those glowing orbs weaving through the darkness ahead. Then, at last, the forest opened up. Clearing. The same one as before. But it wasn't empty this time. The air shimmered faintly, as though heat rose from the ground even though the night was cold. The lights circled slowly overhead, their glow reflecting off something buried beneath the soil. Something metallic. I crouched and brushed away the dirt. My fingers touched smooth steel. It was a piece of machinery, half buried. Old, corroded, covered in moss. It looked like part of a hull, curved and seamless. The kind of metal that shouldn't rust but somehow had. And then, as I leaned closer, the hum changed. It deepened, vibrating through the ground, through me. The lights pulsed faster. My head filled with pressure, and for a moment, I thought I heard voices inside it. Thousands of them, overlapping, whispering in languages I didn't know. When I looked back up, the lights were no longer hovering. They were forming shapes, figures, dozens of them. Tall, thin, flickering silhouettes standing around the clearing, their outlines pulsing faintly with that same pale light. I stumbled backward. My breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. Then one of them stepped forward. It wasn't walking, it was gliding like mist caught in a current. When it stopped, it was close enough that I could see through it. The light inside it wasn't bright. It was steady, contained, as if it burned from a place too deep to reach. It raised an arm, pointed toward the ground where I'd uncovered the metal. Then its voice, or maybe the hum itself, spoke inside my head. "You came back." My throat tightened. "What are you?" "You already know." I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "Why me?" The hum grew stronger. The other shapes began to move, circling slowly. "Because you saw," it said. "And once you see, you belong." The ground trembled. The buried metal groaned, shifting beneath the soil like something waking from a long sleep. The lights above us flared. I dropped to my knees, covering my ears, but the sound wasn't outside anymore. It was inside me, vibrating through every bone, every thought. And then I wasn't in the clearing anymore. I was standing on the ridge again, but it was daylight, impossibly bright, washed in gold. The mountains stretched out forever, silent and perfect. Behind me, a voice whispered, "Look." When I turned, I saw myself. Not as I was, not the tired, broken man I'd become, but standing tall, eyes glowing faintly white. The air shimmered around me. I smiled. "We watch the ones who listen," the voice said. "Now you will listen forever." I woke on the floor of my living room, the hum gone. The lights never came back after that. The woods were silent again. Too silent. My wife returned weeks later. She found me sitting at the window, staring toward the ridge. She said I looked older, pale, hollow-eyed. She asked where I'd been. I told her I hadn't left the house. She didn't believe me. I didn't blame her. Because when she stepped into the kitchen, the reflection in the glass door didn't move with her. Moved with me. And its eyes were glowing faintly white. That was 25 years ago. The doctors say I'm lucky. That whatever I experienced up there was probably stress, exhaustion, a hallucination. But they don't live here. They don't hear the hum under the floorboards on still nights. They don't see the faint shimmer that moves through the woods when the moon is high. Sometimes I go back to the overlook, just to see if the lights will appear again. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but I know they're watching. And every once in a while, when the night is very still, I'll hear a whisper carried on the wind. My own voice, faint and distant, calling from somewhere deep in the mountains. Come back. People still talk about the Silver Bridge collapse like it was an accident. Bad engineering, rust, stress fractures. That's what the reports say. That's what the government said. But I was there, and I know what I saw before it fell. It wasn't metal fatigue that brought that bridge down. It was him. In 1967, I worked nights at the old TNT plant outside Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The place was half abandoned back then. A maze of decaying concrete domes and empty storage bunkers hidden deep in the woods. Most nights were quiet, lonely even. I'd make rounds, check the locks, fill out my logs. Sometimes I'd see deer dart across the access road, their eyes catching my flashlight. Sometimes I'd hear the river moving slow in the dark. Then, one night in November, I heard something that didn't belong. A sound like wings, huge wings, sweeping through the air above the treetops. Froze. The sound came again, closer this time. Heavy enough to shake loose snow from the branches overhead. Then silence. The kind that presses against your skull. I tried to laugh it off. Told myself it was an owl, maybe a heron. Something normal. But then I looked toward the north fence and saw the eyes. 2 red points of light, glowing in the dark. Not reflections. Not headlights. They hovered above the ground, too high for a person, too steady for an animal. I couldn't move. Then they blinked, and in that instant I saw it. A shape unfolding behind the eyes, taller than any man, blacker than the woods themselves. It stood there, wings half spread, the faint glimmer of feathers catching the moonlight. And then it tilted its head, as if studying me. That tiny, slow movement broke whatever spell I was under. I stumbled back toward my truck, fumbling with the keys, never taking my eyes off those lights. When the engine roared to life, the thing moved. It leapt, launched into the air, wings striking the wind with a sound like tearing metal. It circled once over the plant, then vanished into the trees. I sat there, shaking, watching the woods breathe. When I finally made it home, the clock said 3:27 a.m. But my watch had stopped at 2:46. I didn't tell anyone at first. Who would believe it? A giant Mothman with glowing red eyes. I could already hear the laughter. But then the others started talking. 2 couples had been out near the same plant a few nights later, driving along Route 62. They said a thing chased their car, kept up even when they hit 100 miles an hour. Red eyes, huge wings, screaming sound. Same place, same description. Suddenly, Point Pleasant wasn't just another quiet river town. Reporters came, UFO people, paranormal investigators. And all the while people kept seeing it, hovering near rooftops, perched on telephone poles, standing by the river. The police started calling it the Mothman, like a joke, but I knew better. Because every night I heard it again, that sound of wings just beyond the trees. And every morning I found dead birds scattered near the TNT domes. Their eyes were gone. On December 12th, I decided to stop pretending. I brought a camera and a flashlight and went back out to the plant after dark. The cold cut deep that night. The moon was a thin, broken line above the treetops. I parked by the fence and climbed over, boots sinking into the frozen mud. The air smelled of iron and ash. The woods were wrong, too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. Then, from somewhere ahead, I heard a soft, rhythmic thump. 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 Wings. I followed the sound, heart hammering. The deeper I went, the stronger the feeling grew. A low, electric pressure behind my eyes, the same I'd felt that first night. I reached the clearing by the 3rd bunker, the one with the roof half collapsed, and saw him again. He stood in the doorway, crouched, motionless. His wings folded tight against his body. Those red eyes burned through the dark, locked on me. For a moment, Neither of us moved. The wind hissed through the grass. Then he stepped forward. Not a flutter, not a leap, just a slow, deliberate step, the ground crunching beneath his weight. I raised the camera with trembling hands and took the picture. The flash exploded white, and in that instant he screamed. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something in between, metallic, raw, endless. I stumbled backward, blinded by the flash. When my eyes cleared, the doorway was empty. The camera in my hands was dead. And when I turned to run, I saw a single feather lying in the snow, black, slick, and glistening as if wet with oil. I still have that feather. Some nights, it moves when the wind doesn't. The next day, I tried to get the photo developed. The man at the shop looked at me strange when he handed it over. "It's all fogged," he said. "You must have overexposed it." But when I looked closer, I saw something else. In the center of the photo, just behind the white flare of the flash, was a shape. Not clear. More like a shadow etched into the light itself. Wings. Looking straight at the camera. Looking straight at me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those wings spreading across the dark. And behind them something else, something I couldn't name. Something coming. 2 days later, I woke to sirens. They said the Silver Bridge had collapsed during rush hour. 46 people dead. I drove to the site, numb, watching men wade through the icy water pulling bodies from twisted metal. And then I saw it again. Just above the wreckage, perched on the skeletal remains of a support beam, was a shape, black against the gray sky, wings half spread. For a second it looked down, and I swear to God it was smiling. Then it rose, slow and silent, and vanished into the clouds. That was the last time I saw it in daylight. But night never forgot. The bridge fell on a cold December afternoon, but the winter that followed never ended for me. For weeks, Point Pleasant smelled of twisted steel and river silt. The air itself felt heavier. We buried the bodies, rebuilt the roads, patched the stories, and tried to believe it was over. But every night I'd wake to the same sound. Wings beating once, slow and deliberate, somewhere above the house. And underneath that, a hum. Low, pulsing like a heartbeat trapped inside the walls. The first dream came a week after the collapse. I was standing in the middle of the bridge again, but the water below was glowing red. The sky was gray, and the cables groaned like living things. Then I heard it, that metallic cry that tore through my skull. When I turned, he was standing at the far end of the bridge. Still, silent, wings folded behind him like curtains of smoke. He raised one clawed hand and pointed at me. Then the bridge began to shake. I woke with my heart hammering and my bedsheets soaked through with sweat. But there was something worse. A black smear on the window, shaped like a handprint, the glass cold to the touch. Few days later I started getting the phone calls. No one spoke on the other end. Just that same low hum, steady and constant, until I hung up. Sometimes it came once a night, sometimes 3 or 4 times. Once, I let it play for almost a minute. Right before I hung up, a voice whispered, "You saw too much." Then the line went dead. I tried to leave Point Pleasant. Packed my truck. Told myself I'd drive north and never look back. But halfway across the bridge that replaced the Silver, the engine cut out. Every gauge dropped to 0. The radio fizzed with static. And in that static, through the broken speakers, came a sound I knew too well. Wings slicing through the air. Something passed overhead, blotting out the sunlight for a heartbeat. Then the truck roared back to life. I didn't look up. I just drove until the mountains swallowed the town behind me. But you can't drive away from a shadow that lives inside your memory. I moved to a small place near Gallipolis. Tried to build a quiet life. Nights were still the hardest. Sometimes I'd wake to tapping on the roof, or to the sound of gravel shifting outside. Once, when I looked out the window, I saw 2 red points glowing in the tree line, watching. I stood there until dawn. They never blinked. I told myself maybe it was guilt. Maybe the human mind creates monsters to carry the weight it can't bear. But guilt doesn't leave footprints. And I found them. Behind the house, pressed deep into the frost, 3-toed impressions, each the size of my hand, leading from the trees to the porch. They stopped at the steps, as if whatever made them had stood there, waiting. The townsfolk stopped talking about the bridge after a few years. They wanted their peace back. They called it an accident again, printed little memorial booklets, built a monument. But some of us remembered. Linda Scarberry, one of the girls from the first sighting, swore she still heard the wings at night too. We met once at a diner just outside town. Her hands shook when she poured sugar into her coffee. "It doesn't stop," she whispered. "It follows you." I wanted to ask what it wanted, but she just stared past me toward the window. When I turned, there was nothing there. But the glass was vibrating. That winter I started losing time. Whole hours would vanish. I'd find myself standing outside, barefoot in the snow, staring toward the river with no memory of walking there. Once, I woke in my truck miles away from home. The headlights pointed at the dark entrance of the old TNT plant. My keys were in the ignition. The door to the nearest bunker was open, and something inside was humming. I should have left right then, but curiosity is its own sickness. I stepped inside, flashlight trembling in my hand. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of damp concrete and rust. The beam of light swept across the walls and stopped on something drawn there in charcoal. Wings. Dozens of them, overlapping, scrawled again and again until the stone was black. At the center was a single word. "Listen." Then the hum grew louder. I turned toward the doorway, and there he was, silhouetted against the pale moonlight, wings spreading until they filled the frame. Those red eyes locked onto me again, and for the first time I felt what he felt. Grief. Not hunger. Not anger. Just a sorrow so deep it hollowed me out from the inside. The hum became words, though no mouth moved. They never listen. I stumbled backward, tripped, fell hard onto the concrete. The flashlight skittered across the floor and went out. When I looked up again, he was gone. I don't remember getting home that night. But when I woke, my ears were ringing, and there was a thin layer of ash on my clothes. Outside, the morning was gray and silent, and on my porch railing lay another black feather. That was the night I stopped pretending I was sane. You can't explain away something that looks back at you. You can't bury a name the mountains still whisper. And sometimes when the wind comes down the river and the lights flicker in my kitchen, I swear I hear him again, that metal scream fading into a whisper. It's not over. I used to think the Wampus Cat was just a campfire story, a bit of Cherokee folklore told to keep kids from wandering too far into the woods at night. That was before I saw the eyes. It started 3 summers ago, the year I took a seasonal job as a forestry tech in western North Carolina. Most of my work was dull, mapping old logging trails, checking wildlife cameras, recording signs of bear activity. The mountains there are different, older, heavier, like they're watching you back. You can feel it when you walk the ridgelines. The silence doesn't just fall. It presses. Locals warned me early on. Stay out after dark, especially near the hollow. When I asked why, they said it wasn't the bears you had to worry about, it was her. The Wampus Cat. Half woman, half beast. Cursed for spying on men's sacred rituals. Condemned to roam the woods forever. Howling her grief to the moon. I laughed it off. I'd seen bobcats before. Loud, sure, but harmless enough. Then came the night at Dry Creek Hollow. It was early July, just before midnight. I was out alone, retrieving a trail camera that had stopped transmitting. The sky was overcast, the kind of dark that eats the beam of your flashlight. About halfway down the service road, the forest went quiet. No frogs, no crickets, not even wind. Just that suffocating stillness that makes you feel like you've stepped into someone else's dream. Then I heard it. Scream. Not human, not animal, something between. It started low and broke upward, ragged and long, like metal tearing. Every instinct in me said leave. But I told myself it was a bobcat, maybe a mountain lion. Kept walking. When I reached the clearing, I found the camera half buried in the dirt, claw marks scoring the bark of the nearest tree. 5 deep, clean cuts, higher than my head. I bent to pick up the camera, and that's when I smelled it. Wet fur, rotting leaves, and underneath it, something sweet, almost floral. Then, from the tree line across the clearing, 2 eyes opened. Yellow. Wait. Unblinking. Too high for an animal crouched. Too far apart for a person. They locked onto me. And in that instant, I knew I wasn't alone. I froze, every muscle tight. My flashlight trembled in my hand. The eyes didn't move, but the shadows around them shifted, like something huge was breathing just beyond the light. Then it stepped forward. For a split second, the beam caught it. Not enough to see clearly, but enough to know what I was looking at wasn't supposed to exist. Fur matted and dark as the night itself. Face half hidden, half human. And those eyes, bright enough to burn. It made a sound, a low, rumbling growl that vibrated in my chest. I stumbled back, dropped the flashlight, and ran. Branches tore at my arms. Roots caught my boots. I didn't look back. When I reached the truck, I slammed the door and locked it, gasping. The forest was still. Then something thumped against the side of the truck. Once. Slow, deliberate. The metal shuddered. I started the engine and floored it, fishtailing down the gravel road until the trees thinned and the world felt human again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the motel bathtub, still in my work clothes, waiting for the adrenaline to fade. When I finally looked at the camera I'd grabbed, the screen was cracked, but the SD card was intact. I almost didn't check it, but curiosity's a disease. The footage showed the clearing, wind moving through the grass, a deer passing through around 9:47 p.m. Then at 10:32, static. And beneath the static, a shadow moved. It crept forward on all fours, fast but wrong, like its limbs didn't bend the way they should. Then it stopped, turned toward the lens. Those eyes, yellow, glowing. The feed cut out. The next morning I went straight to the ranger station. The supervisor, old man named Harland, listened without interrupting. When I showed him the footage, he went pale. Then he sighed and said, "You shouldn't have gone there alone." I asked him what he thought it was. He said, "It ain't what it was. It's what's left." I didn't understand. He reached into his desk and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping, yellowed, torn at the edges. The headline read, "Local woman vanishes near Dry Creek. Hunters find shredded clothing." Harlan tapped the photo. Her name was Eliza Stone. Cherokee woman. Disappeared 50 years ago this summer. Some say she went mad. Others say she saw something she wasn't meant to see. He leaned back, eyes distant. They found cat tracks all around her cabin. Big ones. But never any sign of her. That night, I left the ranger station and drove straight home. But home didn't feel safe anymore. The woods behind my cabin seemed to move when I wasn't looking. The smell came back, that same sickly mix of fur and flowers. And sometimes, right before sleep, I'd hear something scrape against the walls outside. Not claws, fingers. I didn't go back to Dry Creek Hollow after that night. Least not at first. But when something follows you home, distance doesn't matter. It began small, doors left open, things missing from where I set them down. The air inside the cabin would change too. Some nights it grew heavy and wet, thick with that same scent from the hollow. Fur, musk, and something sweet, almost cloying. I'd wake up around 3 a.m. to the sound of breathing, soft and rhythmic, like something was curled up just beyond the bed. But when I turned on the light, nothing. At least, that's what I told myself. Then came the prints. They appeared outside my porch steps one morning after a rain. Tracks as big as my hands, shaped like a cat's but far too long in the heel, almost like they had toes. They started at the tree line, stopped right before my door, and didn't go back. I called Harland, told him I was leaving early. I didn't care about the rest of the contract. He told me to wait, said if I really wanted out I should at least understand what I was running from. That night I met him at the station after hours. The place was empty, lit by a single desk lamp that buzzed faintly in the dark. He handed me a thin folder. Inside were half a dozen photos. Old, grainy, some dated back to the 1970s. Each one showed the same clearing. And in every photo, there was something just barely visible. A figure in the tree line, half obscured, crouched low. Long limbs. A mane of tangled hair. Eyes like coins catching the flash. "Eliza Stone," Harlan said quietly. She was one of the last of the old Cherokee families to live out near Dry Creek. Her husband was a trapper, mean as they come. One night he and some of the men went out to hunt, but she followed. She wanted to see the ceremony the elders performed before the hunt. He paused, rubbing the edge of the photo with his thumb. She wasn't supposed to watch. They caught her. Said she'd broken a sacred trust, seen what no woman was meant to. So one of the elders cursed her, bound her spirit to what she feared most. He looked up at me then, his eyes shining in the lamplight. She feared the wild cats. I told him it was a story, just a legend. He nodded slowly. Maybe it was. But I've seen what's out there. And it's older than the story. I asked him what he meant. He said, "The Cherokees say the curse isn't just a punishment. It's a wound, something that keeps bleeding until it's healed. Trouble is, no one remembers how." I left with the folder. I shouldn't have looked at those photos again, but I did over and over until I started seeing her in other places. A reflection in a window, a shadow in the trees. Always just enough to make me doubt myself. One night the power went out. The woods went dead silent. Then came the scraping again. Slow, deliberate, right against the wall by my bed. I held my breath. The scraping stopped. Then came a whisper, soft, low, like the sound of a woman crying into her own hands. I sat frozen until dawn. When I stepped outside, the prints were there again. Deeper this time, circling the cabin. And on my porch, right by the steps, lay something small and wet. A dead rabbit. Eyes missing. By then I'd stopped pretending it wasn't real. I just didn't understand why me. I hadn't broken any rituals. I hadn't seen anything I wasn't supposed to. But the woods remembered something, and somehow I was part of it now. I went back to Harlan. His desk was empty. No note, no sign of him. The other rangers said he'd taken leave suddenly. Personal reasons. The deputy ranger gave me a tight smile when I asked questions. "Harlan's been chasing that story too long," he said. "Got it in his head the thing was real. Folks who go looking for her don't tend to come back right." He was right about one thing. I wasn't coming back right either. I decided to leave the mountains that night. Packed everything I could fit into the truck and started driving before the sun dipped below the ridgeline. But as I reached the bend in the road near Dry Creek, the engine died. No warning. No sputter. Just silence. I tried the ignition again, nothing. Outside, the fog was rolling in fast, heavy and low, wrapping around the trees like smoke. And then I heard it, the scream again. Closer this time. It rose from the hollow, echoing through the woods until it felt like it was inside my head. When it stopped, I realized I was no longer alone. A figure stood in the middle of the road behind me. Too tall, too thin, hair hanging down in dark ropes. I couldn't see her face. She was moving toward me, not walking, not running. Gliding. I slammed the lock on the door and turned the key again. The engine roared to life. When I looked up, she was gone. Just fog. But something had changed. The woods weren't silent anymore. They were whispering, low, overlapping voices, like the trees themselves were speaking a language I wasn't supposed to hear. I drove until the fog thinned and the radio started picking up static again. When I finally reached town, I didn't stop driving. Didn't stop until I saw the lights of the highway. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me out. The air in the cab smelled faintly of flowers. That night, at the motel, I took the folder Harlan had given me and spread the photos across the bed. In the last one, a shot from a game camera dated 1993, I noticed something I hadn't before. Behind the figure in the trees was another shape. A man's outline, broad shoulders, and in the dirt at his feet, something scratched, faint but legible. Help her. I couldn't ignore it after that. That message, help her, burned in my mind like a wound that wouldn't close. I kept asking myself the same question. If Eliza Stone was cursed, if her spirit was trapped, then what did it mean to help her? And why me? I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the motel window and watched the parking lot until dawn. Somewhere around 4, I thought I saw movement, a shadow slipping between the cars, slow and deliberate. When I blinked, it was gone. By sunrise, I'd made my decision. I was going back to Dry Creek Hollow. The drive out there felt like driving backward through time. The roads narrowed, the radio gave up, and the fog rolled in, thicker than I'd ever seen it. The forest waited, expectant. I parked at the trailhead and started down the old service road. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of pine and decay. Every step felt wrong, like the ground didn't want me there. When I reached the clearing, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not just quiet absence. Even the wind had stopped moving. The second thing I noticed was the smell. That same mix of fur and flowers, only stronger now, almost sweet enough to choke on. And then I saw it. Right in the center of the clearing, half buried in the mud, was the old camera I'd lost the first night. Picked it up. The lens was shattered, but the light blinked once before going dark. And from somewhere behind me came a voice. Trembling. A woman's voice. "Please, turn slowly." She stood at the edge of the trees, pale, thin, her hair matted and long enough to brush the ground. Her eyes glowed faintly yellow, but behind the glow, I saw something else, pain. She looked at me the way a dying thing might look at a hunter. "Please," she said again. Her voice cracked. "Help me." I took a step forward. She flinched, retreating halfway into shadow. Her body moved strangely, like her bones didn't remember being human. "What are you?" I whispered. Her expression twisted. Grief, rage, exhaustion all at once. "I was her," she said. "Eliza." I swallowed hard. "The curse." She nodded. "They said I looked where I shouldn't. But I didn't mean to. I only wanted to understand. And when they punished me, they bound me to the hunger of the woods, to the silence, to the pain of every creature that dies afraid." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And it never ends." I should have run. I should have turned and never looked back. But there was something in her voice, something human. "How do I help you?" "Yes." She looked past me into the trees. "He knew. The one who cursed me. His bones are buried here, beneath the old oak. Break the circle that holds him. Let his spirit go, and I'll go too." The forest creaked around us like it was listening. "Where's the circle?" "Yes." She raised her arm, pointing with trembling fingers toward the ridge. "Follow the scent of flowers. You'll find it." The path climbed steeply, the ground slick with moss and ash. The air grew colder the higher I went, until every breath came out white. Then the smell hit me, sharp and sweet like crushed blossoms mixed with blood. At the top of the ridge stood an oak, its trunk blackened and hollow. Around it, carved into the earth, was a circle of stones. Symbols marked each one, old deep cuts filled with something dark. I knelt and brushed away the leaves, my hands shaking. As soon as I touched the stones, the forest moved. Not the trees, the air itself. It shivered, humming low, vibrating through my ribs. Voices rose from the ground, men chanting in a language I didn't know. And in the hollow of the oak, I saw bones. A skull, long and cracked. I reached in. The instant my fingers brushed the bone, the forest screamed. The sound tore through me, wind, thunder, and something like laughter all at once. The stones around the circle began to glow, red seeping up from the carvings like blood rising through water. Then I heard her again. "Break it!" I grabbed one of the stones and slammed it against another. The first crack echoed like a gunshot. The light flickered. I struck again, and again. On the fourth blow, the stone split in half. The chanting stopped. The light died. And from deep in the hollow came a rush of wind that knocked me flat. When I looked up, the circle was gone. So was the skull. And the woods were alive with sound again. Wind, leaves, birds, all at once, like the forest had been holding its breath. I stumbled back down to the clearing. Eliza was gone, but the smell of flowers lingered, faint now, fading with every step. Then, from the shadows, I heard her voice one last time. "Thank you." And just before the sound vanished, I caught sight of her in the tree line. Not the creature I'd seen before, but a woman. Whole. Smiling. She bowed her head, and in that moment she was gone. I left the mountains the next morning. Sold the truck, took a job 2 states away, swore I'd never go back. But the mountains don't forget. Sometimes when the wind's right, I catch that scent again. Wild and sweet, like flowers growing in the dark. And sometimes if I listen close enough, I hear her cry. Not in pain anymore, but in peace. At least that's what I tell myself. Because once, a few months after I left, I got a package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. A shot of the clearing at Dry Creek Hollow. And there, crouched just at the edge of the trees, were 2 yellow eyes. Watching. Waiting. I was 17 when I saw it. Most days, I tell myself I didn't. That what I saw that night was a trick of the dark. Fog, headlights, nerves, anything but what it really was. But every now and then, when the nights get long and the wind moves just right through these West Virginia hills, I hear it again. That hollow sound. That wet, dragging sound. And I remember that it was real. Back then, Grafton was the kind of town you could drive through in 3 minutes and miss if you blinked. My father worked at the rail yard, my mother at the diner. I spent my nights at the reservoir with my best friend, Tommy Price, pretending we weren't as broke and bored as we were. It was the summer of 1967, the same summer the bridge outside town washed out and the papers started talking about the Mothman over in Point Pleasant. Folks around here had their own stories, though. The old-timers talked about a thing that lived near the Grafton mine, where the river cut deep through the rock. They said it came up from the tunnels after dark, crawling on all fours, hunting for the men who died in the collapses. No one ever called it by name. They just said, "Don't whistle near the mine." One Friday, Tommy got it in his head that we should prove the stories were nothing but talk. He had his dad's truck, a 6-pack of beer, and that fearless kind of stupidity you only have when you're young enough to think you can't die. I went along, of course. 17 and bored is a dangerous thing. We drove out past the reservoir, past the old quarry, until the gravel road turned to mud. The mine entrance was about 2 miles in. An iron gate chained shut, rusted over and sagging like old teeth. We parked just off the road. The headlights hit the trees and turned the fog silver. "This is it," Tommy said, killing the engine. "You sure about this?" "Yes." He grinned. "Come on, man. Don't tell me you believe that Headless story." That's what folks called it, the Headless thing. Supposedly, during the old mining days, a man named Collie got caught in a blast. They never found his head, just his body, torn open and still moving when they pulled him out. Some said he'd been seen walking the tracks after that, carrying a lantern where his head should have been. The woods were dead quiet. Not even frogs or crickets. Just the slow drip of water from the trees. We climbed over the gate, flashlights cutting through the mist. The air grew colder the deeper we went, thick with the smell of rust and wet stone. After a few minutes, we came to the mouth of the mine. It yawned open like a wound. Black, silent, endless. "Whistle," Tommy said. I shook my head. "Not funny." He smirked, took a deep breath, and whistled anyway. The sound cut through the dark. One long, sharp note that echoed down the shaft. Then nothing. We waited. He laughed, cracked another beer, and said, "See? Just stories." But then I heard it. At first, it sounded like water dripping somewhere far inside. Slow, steady. Then it changed. The sound grew heavier, dragging, like something wet being pulled across rock. Tommy's smile faded. "You hear that?" he whispered. We backed up a few steps, the beam of his flashlight shaking. The sound came closer, a low, scraping rhythm. Then thump. Another. Another. Like footsteps, but wrong. Too slow. Too heavy. I whispered, "Tommy, let's go." He nodded, but we didn't move. Because then the smell hit us. Copper and rot, thick enough to taste. And from the darkness inside the shaft came a light. Lantern. Swung back and forth, steady, bobbing closer. I could hear the chain clinking. The footsteps stopped just at the edge of the light. Tommy raised his flashlight. And that's when we saw it. A man's body, or what was left of one. Clothes in tatters, skin gray and slick. Chest caved in like it had been crushed from the inside. And where the head should have been, nothing. Just a ragged hole, dark and glistening. The lantern hung from a hook embedded deep in what was left of its collarbone, swinging slow. It raised one arm, the bones creaked like wet wood, and pointed straight at us. Then it dropped the lantern. The light went out, and something moved. We ran. I don't remember the path or the trees or how we even made it back to the truck. I just remember the sound behind us, a wet dragging, growing louder, faster. When we reached the gate, Tommy slipped on the mud. I grabbed his arm and pulled him over just as the chain rattled. We didn't look back. He slammed the truck into gear, tires spinning, and we tore down the road, the rearview mirror filled with fog and shadows that didn't move right. When we hit pavement again, we didn't speak. Didn't stop until we were back in town, parked under the lights by the diner, gasping like we'd run a mile uphill. Tommy swore me to silence that night, said no one would believe us, and he was right. I never told a soul. But 3 days later, they found his truck abandoned on the bridge outside town. Door open, engine still running. No sign of him. Just a lantern sitting in the passenger seat. Still warm. I left Grafton that fall. The police said Tommy probably ran off, maybe to Pittsburgh or Cincinnati, chasing work or maybe a girl. His mother didn't believe it though. She said he'd never have left without saying goodbye. She was right. I didn't tell her about the mine or what we saw. Told no one. But I couldn't sleep after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that lantern swinging, back and forth, until the darkness inside it started to look like a face. The years blurred after that. I went to college, married, had a kid. Moved as far from those hills as I could. But no matter where I went, I couldn't get away from it. Some nights, I'd wake to a sound I hadn't heard since that summer. A slow, wet dragging just beyond the edge of hearing. Once, when I was living in Virginia, I found a smudge of black soot on my porch in the shape of a handprint. The next morning, I told myself it was from the chimney sweep. But deep down, I knew better. By the time my son was old enough to ask why I never went back home, I'd run out of excuses. So when my mother passed in the winter of '89, I finally returned. Grafton hadn't changed much. Same hollow streets, same diner, same fog hanging low over the river. Only the mine was gone, sealed off years ago after another collapse. The local paper had a piece about it. Grafton shaft closed for good. Buried in the article was one strange line. Unexplained activity reported near the lower tunnels, investigation ongoing. That was enough to keep me awake that night. The next morning I drove out to the old site. The road was rougher now, half swallowed by weeds and mud. The gate was gone, replaced by a slab of concrete where the entrance used to be. Someone had spray-painted words across it. "Do not whistle." Sent a chill straight through me. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw it. Lying half buried in the dirt beside the road. A rusted lantern. It was the same kind they used in the mines. Iron frame, glass cracked but intact. When I touched it, the metal felt warm. I dropped it and stepped back fast, heart hammering. And from somewhere deep in the trees came that sound again. Rag, lump, low, deliberate, coming closer. I told myself it was my imagination, that memory was playing tricks. But when I got back to town, I saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a missing person flyer on the diner window. Daniel Price, last seen near Grafton Mine Road. Tommy's last name. His nephew. I went inside, asked the waitress about it. She said Daniel had gone out there 2 weeks ago with some friends, drinking, exploring. They found the truck. Door open. Engine running. No Daniel. Just a lantern. That night I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. That maybe it never had been. Whatever was in those tunnels hadn't died. Had just been waiting. And now it was calling again. I started having the dream a few days later. Always the same. I'm standing at the mouth of the mine, the fog thick and red, and somewhere inside, a light swings back and forth. Each night it comes a little closer. Each night, I wake up just before it reaches me. By the fourth night I stopped fighting it. I knew what I had to do. So I packed a flashlight, a flask, and the old hunting knife my father left me, and drove back to the mine road. The moon was high, bright enough to silver the fog. The slab over the entrance looked the same as before. Gray, cracked, lifeless. But when I pressed my hand against it, it wasn't cold anymore. Something pulsed behind the stone. Faint, like a heartbeat. I walked the perimeter, trying to find an opening. That's when I noticed a fissure at the edge of the hill. Small, half hidden by roots and fallen leaves. When I shone my light inside, it caught the glint of water on stone. Tunnel. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe guilt. Maybe curiosity. Maybe both. But I crawled in. The air was damp and stale, full of that same copper tang I'd tried so long to forget. The tunnel sloped downward. After a few yards, the beam of my flashlight caught something on the wall. Markings scratched into the rock with something sharp. I brushed the dirt away and read the words. "It still walks." Kept going. The tunnel opened into a small chamber, and the air grew heavier. There, in the center of the floor, stood another lantern. This one was lit. The flame didn't flicker. It burned steady, blue-white, like it was breathing. And beneath it lay a shape half covered in dirt. Bones. I knelt, brushing away the dust, and froze. The skull was missing. Just a jagged break where the neck ended. That's when I heard it. Behind me. Soft, wet sound. Drag. Thump. Drag. Thump. I turned slowly, light trembling in my hand. First I saw nothing. Just darkness. Then something shifted in it. Shape. Broad. Moving low like it was bent double. It stopped just inside the edge of my light. And I swear to God, I could hear it breathe. It stood there for a long time, not moving, not speaking, just breathing. The sound was wet and slow, the kind of sound lungs shouldn't make. The beam from my flashlight trembled across the dark until it landed on something slick. Hand. Butted. Fingers stiff, curled like claws. Took one dragging step forward. The light caught the glint of the lantern hook still jutting from its collarbone. The metal groaned as it moved, the old chain rattling against bone. And though it had no head, no mouth, I could hear a sound rise from it. Low, hollow moan, like wind through a tunnel. I backed up until my boots hit the bones on the ground. The thing stopped, almost curious, as if it could sense what I was standing on. Then it reached toward me. Slow, trembling, a ruined gesture that almost looked human. Tommy! The name slipped out before I realized it. The thing froze. For 1 second, I swore the air changed. The weight of it shifted, the damp smell fading to something familiar. And then the lantern on its chest flared bright white. I fell back, shielding my face, and when I looked again, it was closer. Right in front of me now, its hand almost touching mine. I saw it clearly then. What was left of its chest cavity, blackened, burned from the inside out. There was something moving in there. Something alive. A faint red pulse, like a heart that refused to die. And just for a moment I heard a voice. Not in my ears, but in my head, deep and broken. He's still here. You called him back. You whistled. The walls trembled. The ground beneath me cracked, sending dust and small stones raining down. The air turned hot, and the lantern light began to pulse in rhythm with that awful heartbeat. The thing straightened, as though remembering how to stand. And though it had no head, no eyes, I felt it look at me. That same feeling I'd had all those years ago. The sense that something ancient, older than the mountain itself, was seeing through me. Took another step forward. The smell of copper and rot filled my lungs. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Then, just before it reached me, the light went out. I woke outside, lying on the side of the road, covered in mud and dust. The fissure in the hillside was gone, sealed, smooth as if it had never been there. The sun was rising over the trees. When I looked down, there was something in my hand. Lantern. Still warm. I drove out of Grafton that same morning and didn't stop until I crossed the state line. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head. Exhaustion, grief, hallucination. But when I got home and set that lantern on my porch, I saw something etched into the glass I hadn't noticed before. Tiny letters, carved from the inside. D.P. Daniel Price. Tommy's nephew. That night, I locked the lantern in my shed and tried not to think about it. But sleep didn't come. Around midnight, I heard a sound outside. A slow scrape along the gravel. Then a thump. Another. And then, faintly, a whistle. Long, sharp. Echoing through the dark. Froze. When I looked out the window, I saw it at the edge of the yard. A shape. Tall, gray, glistening in the moonlight. No head. Just a faint red glow in its chest where a heart should have been. It turned toward the shed. The lantern inside began to glow. That was 3 years ago. I've moved twice since then, but it still finds me. Always after dark. Always when the fog rolls in thick and low. Sometimes I wake to find mud on my porch steps. Sometimes I hear the whistle carried through the wind. And once, just once, I woke to see the lantern hanging from my front gate, swinging back and forth, like it was waiting. I don't know what it wants anymore. Maybe it's not Tommy. Maybe it never was. Maybe it's something older, something that wore his body for a while. A thing the mountain kept. All I know is, it doesn't stop once it's found you. And if you ever drive through Grafton after dark, don't whistle. Don't stop if you see a lantern burning on the side of the road. And whatever you do, don't look back when you hear it dragging behind you. The light caught the glint of the lantern hook still jutting from its collarbone. The metal groaned as it moved, the old chain rattling against bone. And though it had no head, no mouth, I could hear a sound rise from it. Low, hollow moan, like wind through a tunnel. I backed up until my boots hit the bones on the ground. The thing stopped, almost curious, as if it could sense what I was standing on. Then it reached toward me. Slow, trembling, a ruined gesture that almost looked human. Tommy! The name slipped out before I realized it. The thing froze. For 1 second, I swore the air changed. The weight of it shifted, the damp smell fading to something familiar. And then the lantern on its chest flared bright white. I fell back, shielding my face, and when I looked again, it was closer. Right in front of me now, its hand almost touching mine. I saw it clearly then. What was left of its chest cavity, blackened, burned from the inside out. There was something moving in there. Something alive. A faint red pulse, like a heart that refused to die. And just for a moment I heard a voice. Not in my ears, but in my head, deep and broken. He's still here. You called him back. You whistled. The walls trembled. The ground beneath me cracked, sending dust and small stones raining down. The air turned hot, and the lantern light began to pulse in rhythm with that awful heartbeat. The thing straightened, as though remembering how to stand. And though it had no head, no eyes, I felt it look at me. That same feeling I'd had all those years ago. The sense that something ancient, older than the mountain itself, was seeing through me. Took another step forward. The smell of copper and rot filled my lungs. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Then, just before it reached me, the light went out. I woke outside, lying on the side of the road, covered in mud and dust. The fissure in the hillside was gone, sealed, smooth as if it had never been there. The sun was rising over the trees. When I looked down, there was something in my hand. Lantern. Still warm. I drove out of Grafton that same morning and didn't stop until I crossed the state line. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head. Exhaustion, grief, hallucination. But when I got home and set that lantern on my porch, I saw something etched into the glass I hadn't noticed before. Tiny letters, carved from the inside. D.P. Daniel Price. Tommy's nephew. That night, I locked the lantern in my shed and tried not to think about it. But sleep didn't come. Around midnight, I heard a sound outside. A slow scrape along the gravel. Then a thump. Another. And then, faintly, a whistle. long sharp, echoing through the dark. Froze. When I looked out the window, I saw it at the edge of the yard. A shape. Tall, gray, glistening in the moonlight. No head. Just a faint red glow in its chest where a heart should have been. It turned toward the shed. The lantern inside began to glow. That was 3 years ago. I've moved twice since then, but it still finds me. Always after dark. Always when the fog rolls in thick and low. Sometimes I wake to find mud on my porch steps. Sometimes I hear the whistle carried through the wind. And once, just once, I woke to see the lantern hanging from my front gate, swinging back and forth, like it was waiting. I don't know what it wants anymore. Maybe it's not Tommy. Maybe it never was. Maybe it's something older, something that wore his body for a while. A thing the mountain kept. All I know is, it doesn't stop once it's found you. And if you ever drive through Grafton after dark, don't whistle. Don't stop if you see a lantern burning on the side of the road. And whatever you do, don't look back when you hear it dragging behind you. I never believed in curses. Not ghosts, not demons, not anything that couldn't be weighed, measured, and explained by reason. I made a name for myself tearing apart ghost stories and small-town legends. I'd travel, record the interviews, pick apart the inconsistencies, then upload the truth. But there was one story I couldn't shake. It started as a rumor in a roadside diner. A whispered warning about a place deep in the Appalachian hills, a clearing where nothing grows, no birds sing, and compasses refuse to point north. They called it the Devil's Circle. I first heard about it outside of Marion, Virginia. An old man at the counter was telling a young couple to stay clear of a back road called Harlow Ridge. He said there was a spot in those woods where hunters vanished, where animals turned up mutilated but untouched by decay. God won't go there, he said, without looking up from his coffee. When I asked him why, he just shook his head. 'Cause it ain't his ground anymore. That was all it took. By the end of the week, I'd found the coordinates. An unmarked patch of forest just beyond an abandoned logging road. Locals warned me not to go alone. They said the trees there lean away from the center, like they're trying to escape. That even the wind won't blow through the clearing. But skepticism is stubborn. And pride is even worse. So on an October afternoon, I packed my camera, recorder, a tent, and enough supplies for one night. My goal was simple. Document the so-called Devil's Circle, debunk the legend, and post the footage by Halloween. I should have listened to them. The road up Harlow Ridge was little more than a scar in the hillside. Overgrown, slick with wet leaves. My tires spun twice before I made it to the top, where the trees closed in and daylight thinned to a dull copper haze. I parked beside a rusted fence post, killed the engine, and stepped into a silence so thick it felt alive. No birds, no insects, not even the distant hum of wind through branches. The air had weight to it, damp and faintly metallic like blood on iron. I checked my compass. The needle spun twice, then stopped dead, pointing west. I laughed to break the tension, told myself it was just a magnetic anomaly, maybe old equipment from the logging days buried under the soil. But the deeper I walked, the stranger it became. The forest floor was soft and uneven, littered with old bones. Deer mostly, though some were blackened, brittle, like they'd been burned long ago. Then I saw it. The clearing. Perfectly round, maybe 50 feet across. Not a single blade of grass or fallen leaf inside it. Just smooth, bare earth the color of ash. Around the edge, the trees leaned outward, their roots twisted and warped as if straining to get away. And in the exact center, there was a ring of stones, 12 of them, black, wet, and glistening in the weak afternoon light. I started recording. October 18th, I said into the mic, Harlow Ridge, Virginia. Local legend calls this area the Devil's Circle. So far, I've observed abnormal compass readings and... Pause. The recorder clicked in my hand, even though I hadn't stopped it. Then again, blick, blick, like someone was pressing the button from the other side. I frowned, shook it, and kept going. Could be magnetic interference. Documenting now. I circled the clearing, counting the stones. 12 exactly, spaced evenly apart. Old runes carved into them, circular, overlapping, worn smooth by time. I knelt to trace one with my finger. It was warm. By dusk, I'd set up camp at the edge of the circle. The ground outside the ring felt normal enough. My tent faced the clearing so I could keep it in view. I ate a cold dinner, wrote notes, and waited for the temperature to drop. Around 9, fog began to creep in from the trees, low and heavy. My compass needle started twitching again. When I switched on my camera, the screen flickered white, static. Then the audio cut out. I tried the backup camera. Same result. Every time I pointed the lens toward the clearing, the feed turned to snow. When I turned it back toward the woods, the picture cleared. I tested it again. Snow in the circle. Normal outside. That was when I heard it. A faint rustling in the dirt. Something was moving across the clearing. I shone my flashlight. Nothing there. But the sound kept going, circling the stones, slow and deliberate, like footsteps dragging through dust. The air grew colder, heavy enough that I could see my breath. My flashlight dimmed. And then, a sound I'll never forget. A whisper. Low, harsh, almost too faint to hear. Came from everywhere at once. I froze, trying to pick out words. Something about staying out. Or staying still. The whisper rose into a sigh, long and mournful, like 1,000 voices buried under the soil. Then it stopped, all at once, and the clearing went black. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed, clutching the flashlight that no longer worked. The fog had thickened so much I couldn't see the edge of the trees anymore. Then, from somewhere inside the clearing, I saw a faint red glow. Pulsed once. Then spread. A circle of dull crimson light, tracing the exact outline of the stones. And in the center, the dirt began to move, like something underneath was breathing. The ground moved like a slow exhale, rising and falling under the thin red glow. I tried to tell myself it was gas venting from a sinkhole, heat escaping from deep stone, anything except the truth forming in my gut. The clearing was alive. I backed toward the tent, every step careful, measured. The fog was so thick that the beam from my dying flashlight looked solid, like a column of dust instead of light. Somewhere to my left, I heard a faint click. Then another. My recorder. It had been on the ground, but now it was playing back. My own voice, distorted and slow. October 18th. Local. Legend. The words twisted, slowed to a crawl, as if someone was dragging their finger along the tape inside. Then another voice, low, wet, overlapping mine, spoke through it. Not your ground. My first instinct was to run. But every direction looked the same. Fog, trees bending away from the circle, darkness pressing close. So I did what I always did when fear tried to take over. I documented. I lifted the recorder, hands shaking. Unexplained movement within the circle. Possible gas pocket or seismic. The ground lurched. The dirt in the center cracked open. Thin veins spiderwebbing outward from the glow. The stones began to vibrate, humming so low I felt it more than heard it. And from the cracks came a smell so foul it burned my throat. Wet ash and rot, old blood and ozone. Something inside the earth shifted again, closer to the surface. Then I heard the whisper return. It was sealed. You broke it. I stumbled back, tripping over a root. The red glow dimmed, then flared bright enough to blind me. When my vision cleared, the circle looked different. Shapes had appeared in the dirt. Prints pressed deep into the ash. They weren't human. Not animal either. Each was wide and long, with 5 crooked points like a hand dragged sideways through mud. The fog above the circle began to spin, slow at first, then faster, forming a column that rose straight into the sky. For a heartbeat I thought I saw faces in it. All screaming without sound. The hum from the stones grew sharper, climbing into a pitch that rattled my teeth. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, trying to block it out. Then silence. The glow went out. The fog froze in place. For one brief second, the clearing was still again. I thought it was over. until the dirt at the center collapsed inward. A hollow sound, like air being sucked into a void, filled the forest. Then something stepped out of that hole. I didn't see its shape, not clearly. The fog moved around it like it was alive, hiding more than it revealed. All I could make out was the outline of a figure, tall, lean, wrong. Its limbs bent at odd angles, like joints where no joints should be. Stood there, motionless, facing me. And though it had no face, I felt its attention hit me like heat from an open furnace. I tried to speak, to ask who or what it was, but the words turned to steam in my throat. Moved one slow step forward. The air around it shimmered. The trees groaned, their bark splitting as if the very roots were pulling away from that thing. Then, in a voice that wasn't sound but vibration, I heard it inside my skull. This ground was marked. You entered unbidden, so you'll feed what you woke. My legs finally obeyed. Ran. Branches tore at my arms, roots caught my boots, but I didn't stop. I could feel the air bending behind me, heavy and wet, dragging like a tide pulling me back. The woods changed as I moved. Trees leaned closer, their trunks slick with moisture that smelled like iron. The path I'd followed up was gone, nothing but endless gray. Behind me, the whisper grew louder. Not one voice anymore. Hundreds, thousands. Stay, stay, stay. I don't remember reaching my truck. I just remember the door slamming, the engine roaring to life, and my foot jamming the accelerator until the wheels found traction. The fog pursued me down the mountain, thick tendrils reaching through the trees like fingers. When I finally hit the main road, dawn was breaking, but my watch said it was still midnight. I drove for 2 days straight. Didn't stop except for gas. Didn't look in the rearview mirror. When I got home, I tried to review the footage. Every file was corrupted, static and screaming. Except one. A single frame, frozen on the screen. The clearing at night, lit by that red glow. And in the center, standing where the hole had been, a figure. Arms too long. Head tilted as if listening. Looking directly at the camera. Looking directly at me. I deleted everything that night. Burned the notes. Smashed the equipment. But it didn't matter. Because 3 days later I found dirt on my doorstep. Ash-gray dirt, smooth and fine. And pressed into it 5 crooked prints. Like a hand dragged sideways. That was 2 years ago. Moved. Changed my name. Stopped doing investigations altogether. But some nights, when the air grows heavy and the lights flicker, I smell it again. Wet ash and rot. Old blood and ozone. And from somewhere in the darkness outside, I hear the whisper. Stay. The locals were right about one thing. Some ground doesn't belong to God anymore. And once you step inside, it never lets you leave. 5 stories. 5 encounters. 5 people who walked into the Appalachian darkness and brought something back with them. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fate. Or maybe the mountains were just waiting for someone to listen. If you're out there tonight, alone in the dark, and you hear something that doesn't sound quite right, a hum beneath the floorboards, wings beating slow above your roof, a whisper calling your name from the trees. Remember, some things in these mountains don't want to be found. But once they find you, they never let go. Thanks for listening to Silent Scream Chronicles. If you made it this far, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever encountered something in the woods you couldn't explain? Because the mountains are still listening, and they remember every name. Until next time, stay safe out there.